Hare Krishna. Good morning, dear devotees. Glories to Srila Prabhupada. I was just looking before class. When's the last time I gave class from Brihad Bhagavatamrita? And I can see that it was on February 8th, just before Vyasa Puja in Mayapur. And then I was hoping that once I got to Hungary, I could become more consistent in giving morning classes. But when I went to Ukraine, it was not possible. And when I returned from Ukraine, many things were going on, and it was also difficult for me. So it's been quite a few weeks since we had last time we had Bhagavatamrita. And because I'm engaged in regular readings during the day of Brihad Bhagavatamrita with devotees online, I'm completely at a different place in Brihad Bhagavatamrita right now. We're currently discussing Gopakumar's journey into the Vaikuntha planets, which is volume 2 of Brihad Bhagavatamrita. And we've been getting into a very detailed discussion about why so much emphasis has been placed on Lakshmi's presence, Mahalakshmi's presence in Vaikuntha. And we've been getting very much into the details about how she creates unlimited varieties of enjoyment in the spiritual world. She creates the different types of ecstasies that devotees experience in devotional service. In fact, she's described as the mother of all the ecstasies of devotional service. And even the different varieties of forms, unlimited varieties of forms that Krishna assumes in Vaikuntha is the result of her influence. All these different manifestations of the Lord and the different abodes in Vaikuntha, they all manifest to reciprocate the devotion of devotees. And the different varieties of devotion are all coming from Mahalakshmi. And the forms of the Lord, the devotees themselves, are all different manifestations that are influenced by her presence in Vaikuntha. What to speak of the unlimited opulences that exist in Vaikuntha? So, of course, Mahalakshmi, she's manifesting all these different opulences in Vaikuntha, but she also has a material form, which is Lakshmi, who is Chanchala Lakshmi, who manifests in the material universes. All the various varieties of opulences in the material world are also unlimited. But as we understand, if the opulences that are all coming from Lakshmi are not kept with Lord Narayan, then she's chanchala, or she's flickering. She will not stay. So just like the other day, I guess it was very recently, 2 days ago, was Ram Navami, and we know that Sita Devi is also an expansion of Lakshmi. And Prabhupada speaks often in the commentaries of the Bhagavatam how Ravana was trying to steal Sita from Ramachandra. But one who tries to take Lakshmi away from Narayan is only going to be creating a future source of suffering when all is lost. Because she's chanchala, she's flickering, she will not stay unless she can be connected in service to Lord Narayan. So if we take into consideration the unlimited opulences of the material universes and the different gradations of opulences as one ascends in the universe, for instance, one thing Gopakumar, he noticed as he was ascending through the different planets throughout the universe is that each planet he arrived at, the residents were thousands of times, even millions of times more beautiful than the previous place where he had been. And the opulences also were thousands and millions of times greater as Gopakumar was ascending from each place to the next place. For instance, the opulences of the heavenly planets were totally insignificant in the presence of the opulences of Satyaloka. And then as Gopakumar went beyond Satyaloka and began traveling through the coverings of the universe, similarly, he was noticing that the opulences, even in the coverings of the universe, were increasingly greater and greater compared to the previous covering of the universe.
И затем, когда Гопакумар вышел за пределы Сатьялоки,
and those are all the opulences of the material universes. And they're temporary because everything, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, from the highest planet in the material universe to the lowest planet, all the places of repeated birth and death. So all the opulences of the material universe are also temporary. And nobody can keep them, including Lord Brahma, because they're temporary, as is Lord Brahma. And that's just the material universes. So we're talking about the unlimited opulences of Vaikuntha and the unlimited varieties of opulences that exist in Vaikuntha, and the unlimited varieties of ecstasy and the unlimited varieties of devotion that exist in Vaikuntha, and the unlimited forms of the Lord that exist to reciprocate with that devotion from unlimited varieties of devotees in Vaikuntha. They're all coming from Mahalakshmi. And Sanatana Goswami brings out the point in one commentary in the 4th chapter of Brihad Bhagavatamrita Volume 2. He says that the reason why all of these opulences are being described coming from Mahalakshmi is to help us to understand the greater opulences and the greater glories of Srimati Radharani and the gopis in the spiritual world. Because the unlimited varieties of devotional service that manifest from the eternally liberated souls in Goloka Vrindavan far surpass the pleasures and ecstasies and enjoyment of the residents of Vaikuntha.
I'm sorry, please, could you please repeat again?
Okay, I'm sorry. The unlimited varieties of enjoyment and devotees that exist in Goloka Vrindavan.
Oh, okay.
They by far surpass all the different varieties of ecstasies the devotees experience in Vaikuntha. Why does it say that my time is up? This is supposed to be transcendental subject matter.
Да, не
Supposed to
должно быть.
transcend time. That's the whole point of the second verse of the second canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. That by rising and setting, the sun decreases the duration of life of everyone. For one who utilizes the time for discussing the topics of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So why is my time up? Can somebody please explain that to me?
I don't know how somebody started a timer.
Somebody started a timer. Okay. So it's not going to happen again. It's not that the screen is going to disappear and everyone will be gone. Okay. All right. So anyways, Srila Sanatana Goswami explains in the commentary that all of these different varieties of devotees and devotion and ecstasies of Vaikuntha are to help us to understand the superiority of Goloka Vrindavan. Because the real opulence of Goloka Vrindavan are the human-like pastimes of the Supreme Lord, which are the source of all varieties of enjoyment that exist throughout Vaikuntha. Of course, is our reverence. But in Goloka Vrindavan, there is no awe and reverence. Why is there no awe and reverence? Because of Yogamaya's presence. And due to Yogamaya's presence, the devotees are all covered by her potency. So the devotees never have to experience this awe and reverence of seeing Krishna as the Supreme Lord. Therefore, their devotion is far more spontaneous than the devotion of varieties of ecstasy and devotion of the devotees in Vaikuntha, because their love is crippled by the presence of awe and reverence. Because these see the forms of the Lord as Krishna himself, as the supreme, majestic form of the Lord, who is sitting on his throne and who's receiving the reverential prayers of the Vedas, and whose devotees are surrounding him with great reverence. But in Goloka, there is no awe and reverence. And because there's no awe and reverence, therefore the higher forms of ecstasy, of spontaneous devotional service, are experienced by those devotees in Goloka Vrindavan. And all of those varieties of ecstasies of spontaneous devotional service are all due to the presence of Srimati Radharani. In fact, I just thought of something. If you give me about 15 seconds, maybe 30 seconds, I could find something very, very wonderful I was listening to in class yesterday morning from Srila Prabhupada. So wonderful. It's just on this point. I heard it in class, and when I heard it, I immediately wanted to go to the lecture and to read it, because it was so wonderful, because Prabhupada was talking about the bliss of Goloka Vrindavan, and specifically Krishna and Radharani. And I looked it up in the database and began reading what I had heard in the class. It was a class that Srila Prabhupada gave in New Vrindavan in 1972. In 1971, Sri Sri Radha Vrindavan Chandra were installed in New Vrindavan. And in 1972, Srila Prabhupada came to New Vrindavan to spend a substantial amount of time there. And the devotees, in order to receive Srila Prabhupada and to properly worship Radha Vrindavan Chandra, they had built a temple for them, because previously there wasn't even a temple for them to be worshipped. And I remember that temple. I had visited there in I think it was in the early spring of 1973. It had previously been a small farmhouse. And that's where I believe Radha Vrindavan Chandra were worshipped, in the farmhouse. But they built a little extension to the farmhouse, which had a separate entrance. And they moved Radha Vrindavan Chandra into that extension. And it was a small temple room, very small temple room. But Radha Vrindavan Chandra were there, and Srila Prabhupada came specifically to see Radha Vrindavan Chandra in their new temple. And I believe this was the first Srimad Bhagavatam class that Prabhupada was giving there in New Vrindavan, in their new temple. And Prabhupada was sitting, and I'm giving that little background to help you to understand the kind of experience Srila Prabhupada had by sitting in their temple and seeing Radha Vrindavan Chandra in the temple room and seeing their beauty. And Prabhupada is talking about the Srimad Bhagavatam. He's speaking from the very first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So he says the authority in Srimad Bhagavatam, the authority is there in Srimad Bhagavatam. So if we simply scrutinizingly study what sort of body God has, it is in simple language it is given. Sat Chit Ananda. Ananda means blissful, always blissful. And then Prabhupada says, you have seen our Krishna, how blissful he is. He's looking at Vrindavan Chandra. He is playing on his flute. And his eternal consort, Radharani, is there. And Prabhupada says to the devotees, he's not blissful? Isn't he blissful? Can't you see how blissful he is? And all the devotees, they raise their hands, Jai! And Prabhupada says, you like? Because you are part and parcel of God. Therefore, you also like that blissful life. You want, young girl wants young boy, and the young boy wants a young girl. Live together blissfully. But that is not possible because it is the material world. But the idea comes from God. Janmadhyasya yata. Where from this idea came? Unless in God the same propensity is there. Love between young girl and young boy. Where from this idea has come in this world? Therefore it is said, Janmadhyasya yata, Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, first chapter, first verse. Anything, whatever you see within your experience, that is in God. We are practically sample of God. Whatever propensities there are in God, we have got. Because we are part and parcel of God. Then Prabhupada gets into so much detail about how the drop of ocean water has all the same qualities as the ocean itself, but the ocean is unlimited where the drop is tiny. So Srila Prabhupada, he immediately, when he was looking at Vrindavan Chandra, he was thinking in this way, isn't he not blissful? Just look at him. He's with Radharani. How can he not be blissful? And you want this bliss too. A young boy, a young girl come together and they want this bliss. But it's not possible.
Но
Everyone thinks there'll be bliss, but there's no real bliss. All the bliss is there, and this is the perverted reflection. So that bliss of Goloka Vrindavan exists because Radharani is present. Because she is giving the unlimited, she is the mother, the real mother of devotion in Goloka Vrindavan, and the mother of all ecstasies of devotional service. Because in Goloka Vrindavan, the ecstasies are far greater because of the spontaneous devotional service rendered by the devotees in Goloka. As Krishna describes in the Bhagavatam, such spontaneous devotional service brings me under my devotees' control. I cannot be brought under control by other varieties of devotional service to the degree that I'm become a plaything in the hands of my devotees in Goloka. Because Krishna, even in Vaikuntha, he displays his opulence in his worship with reverence. And he also has to maintain that position of reverence to satisfy all the devotees in Vaikuntha. Maybe you do not remember, but I will try to remind you when we were discussing this section years ago, when I was speaking from Brihad Bhagavatamrita. When Gopakumar was in Dwarka and he was holding his flute, Gopakumar he kept the body of a young cowherd boy and he was always carrying his flute. And when Krishna in Dwarka asked Gopakumar, where have you come from, my dear cowherd boy? Then he began remembering that place from which Gopakumar had come, which was in Govardhan. And he saw the flute in Gopakumar's hands. And he reached down to pick up the flute. And he began looking at the flute and he began feeling the ecstasy of remembering his position as a cowherd boy in Goloka. And his confidential friend and associate, Uddhava, he was present in front of him. And Uddhava began looking at Krishna and understanding what was happening. That Krishna was going deeper into ecstasy by holding the flute. And he was remembering the gopis. And he's remembering Srimati Radharani. But seated around Krishna on his throne in Dwarka were all of his associates who all worship him in awe and reverence. And Uddhava was afraid that Krishna would go so deep in his meditation that they wouldn't be able to understand what's happening to Krishna. So Uddhava indicated to Krishna to try to bring him back to where he was and showing with his presence who was surrounding him and trying to keep him carefully from becoming too lost in meditation. Because that's what happens. The devotees in Vaikuntha, they don't know how to relate to Krishna, who is reciprocating with the love of the gopis. Because the Krishna who reciprocates with the love of the gopis and the cowherd boys reciprocates with spontaneous devotion. But the devotees in Vaikuntha can't be so spontaneous because they worship Krishna in awe and reverence. That's why we understand that there are 2.5 rasas. There's the rasa of friendship, but in awe and reverence. And there's the rasa of servitorship. But in the spiritual, in Goloka Vrindavan, friendship is spontaneous. And the friends think themselves to be equal. And the Mother Jasoda, she thinks Krishna's my son. No awe and reverence. How could she think of Krishna as her son? And what to speak of the gopis, who have no awe and reverence whatsoever, whose chastisements to Krishna for his behavior far surpass the reverential hymns of the Vedas, which are heard elsewhere. And when Krishna hears the chastisement of the gopis, it steals his mind away from the reverential hymns of the Vedas. So this spontaneous devotional service rendered by the devotees in Goloka Vrindavan is the highest ecstasy. Nayam Sukapa Bhaga, what is it, Nayam? Dehinam Gopika Svata. That the Krishna cannot be understood by, no, that's not the verse, it's a different verse. I've forgotten the verse spoken about in the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, which specifically states that spontaneous devotion far surpasses the devotion of that which is not spontaneous. So, anyways, back to what we're reading about. I'm reading about in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita is about these different types of ecstasies the devotees experience in Vaikuntha, and why this, and specifically Sanatana Goswami makes that point in the commentary there, that it helps us better to understand the superiority of Goloka Vrindavan. Sanatana Goswami introduces these different types of devotion in Vaikuntha and the ecstasies in Vaikuntha to make us understand how much greater is Goloka Vrindavan and how much greater is love, which is free from awe and reverence. And therefore we understand that the human-like pastimes of Goloka Vrindavan, for the devotees who want to love Krishna in that mood, then Krishna has this superior place where the devotees can experience that mood, which comes back to Uttara's original question in the beginning of the 2nd volume of Brihad Bhagavatamrita. She asked her son, Parikshit Maharaj, who had just heard the Srimad Bhagavatam and was about to die, can you please tell me that how can there not be a special place for those who love Krishna spontaneously? I can understand how there's a hierarchy of devotion in the spiritual world, but there must be a special place where those devotees who love Krishna spontaneously can serve him and love him beyond the spiritual world of Vaikuntha. I think I'm frozen.
Yes, now it's okay.
Okay, I'm back.
Yes.
Sorry. Yeah, the internet here has been a little problematic because there are high winds and somehow it's affecting the internet. It happens sometimes. I'm surprised it's gone this long. So I'm sorry that I actually went into a completely different topic this morning and I didn't resume where we left off in Brihad Bhagavatamrita. I'm just trying to give you a sense of where my thoughts have been recently with Brihad Bhagavatamrita. And we'll actually begin to see as we continue reading in the first volume where we're reading right now. We will resume reading about Lord Brahma and how Narada Muni, who is the son of Brahma, will come to Lord Brahma, thinking that he is the greatest recipient of Krishna's mercy. And he will see Lord Brahma in the presence of Lord Mahapurusha on Satyaloka and the opulences of Satyaloka and the varieties of opulence that exist there, because the devotees are directly making their offerings of sacrifice to Lord Mahapurusha, and he's accepting all of their offerings of sacrifice. And I think we'll read about the section where Brahma Narada approaches him, but he doesn't bow down to him yet because Mahapurusha is present. Because he doesn't want to offer his obeisances to his father, Lord Brahma, who's the greatest recipient, if the Lord is directly present, because it's not proper to offer reverential prayers if the Lord is also present.
Он не
To
хочет,
somebody else, excuse me, reverential prayers to somebody else if the Lord is present. That is why devotees are never supposed to be worshipped in the presence of the deities, because it's offensive to worship someone else in the presence of the most supremely worshipable object, the Lord Krishna himself. Brahma waits before he offers his respects. Narada waits before he offers his respects to Brahma until Lord Mahapurusha leaves. Then he prostrates himself before his father and begins glorifying him according to what he has heard from Indra. And as we indicated in our last class on this topic, that when Brahma was glorified, Brahma told Narada, haven't I explained this to you before, that I'm not the supreme? And that was all explained in the second canto of the Bhagavatam. And then the third canto of the Bhagavatam is also going to be introduced very soon. Because in the third canto of the Bhagavatam, Brahma prays for the creative potency to create all the living entities again. Excuse me, not the living entities, but to create all the different bodies, to procreate in the universe again after the night of Brahma. And that will become more clear when we begin reading that verse. I think we'll start in chapter 2, text 43, next class, which was actually the class I was going to start giving today, but I didn't because I was thinking about my recent readings in Brihad Bhagavatamrita instead. So we will begin our chanting together, and we will continue for at least an hour, because we changed the clocks here today and I lost an hour this morning. Such is the influence of time in the material world. Time takes away everything. This morning, time took away 1 hour from me, and it took away an hour of my usual japa before class. So let's begin. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.